Welcome to the bold analysis. Why would Francis Atwoli, the KOTU Secretary General, insist that he is the person to welcome Raila Odinga to make his speech in Vihiga while he had already broke ties with Raila Odinga? I want you to take a second and watch this video clip.
Sasa wa mwisho kabla sijaita baba ni deputy governor wetu Mheshimiwa Kitiezo, karibu ombe. Mheshimiwa Kitiezo, alafu niite baba. Deputy governor huyu ni deputy, mimi ni mtu wa hapa. Yeye ataongea na mimi. Mimi ndio nitaita deputy governor. Hii ni matanga ya KOTU, Central Organization of Trade Unions. Sawa, ukitaka kwenda itakuwa. Mimi nataka kumuita Mheshimiwa shemegi yangu Raila. Mimi nataka kumuita Mheshimiwa Raila anaenda Busia, tumusikize mapema.
Now, allow me to explain what happened. That was the funeral of a deputy chairperson, I think it's chairperson of KOTU, a member of KOTU in Vihiga County. And if you look at that event, the leaders in attendance were amongst themselves, amongst those in attendance were ODM leader Raila Odinga, the KOTU boss Francis Atwoli, Wycliffe Ambetsa Oparanya, and Musalia Mudavadi. And the person who made that speech there was the Senator Godfrey Otsotsi, Vihiga senator who is an ODM senator. And he made his speech, but before and of course after him, the other person that was supposed to speak was that rank, and probably the next person, prominent person there, was the ODM leader Raila Odinga. So after finishing his speech, he called the Vihiga deputy governor. And maybe the reason it was, after calling the deputy governor, the Vihiga deputy governor, they were going to invite perhaps the governor. Then the governor would invite Raila, and then after that maybe Atwoli will be invited. But then when Atwoli took over the microphone, he demanded that he is the person to welcome Raila Odinga. And he was going to take charge, invite the guests, and then invite Raila Odinga. Technically, I think things don't just happen. And I can tell you that if there is something that politicians are very careful about or very sensitive about, is about protocol. And I think Otsotsi had already organized with Raila Odinga team that Atwoli was not going to associate directly with Raila Odinga in that funeral. Now that will then play out. That played out clearly in the speeches that I'm going to share with you in this podcast. And the question here is, why do you think Atwoli insisted? And of course, another line of thought here is, if Francis Atwoli was part of organizing that funeral, then maybe he might have invited Raila Odinga there. But of course, Raila Odinga also has the network in Vihiga County. That event was politically significant. If we look at the political man-marking around Raila Odinga there, or rather in respect to that altercation, you'll realize that the leaders shared pleasantries. But I have sampled these few speeches from Raila, Oparanya, and also KOTU boss Francis Atwoli. They were clearly reading from different. They were clearly not at the same page.
Mtu anakuja alafu anatisha watu, anasema ati wewe utahama, nitakuweka wewe jela, au wewe utaenda kwa Mungu. Hiyo mazungumzo ina gani? Sasa Kenya hii imekuwa ni yake. Anakuambia wewe toka. Na wewe umezaliwa hapa Kenya hii, ni nchi yako wewe unajua. Mtu anaambia wewe hama. Uhama waende wapi? Halafu hama sivyo akuleke yeye kwa jela. Yeye ndiye anakushtaki wewe na yeye afunga wewe. Tayari amesema nitakupeleka wewe jela. 3, atakupeleka kwa Mungu. Anakusema atakuua. Hii ni utawala aina gani hii? Hii ni Kenya gani hii? Na hiyo vile nasema juzi tumeona vile vijana wetu wapigwa risasi kwa sababu walikuwa wanafanya maandamano. Kwa hivyo tuko katika hali ya hatari katika nchi hii. Tusipojihadhari, Kenya mtajipata mahali ambayo mtu anashikwa namna hii, anatoroka na haonekani. Sisi kama utawala ya Papadok kule wa Haiti. Wanawake kama mtu anaweza kutisha na yeye ana nguvu, anamwambia wewe usipohama nitakuweka wewe jela au nitakuua wewe ndio kwa Mungu yako. Hiyo ni utawala mzuri hiyo. Hiyo ni utawala mzuri hiyo. Vitisho kama hivyo hatutaki. Vitisho kama hivyo hatutaki. Hiyo ninasema careless talk. Bwana Atwoli, mwambie rafiki yako usifanye hiyo. Shenzi sana.
Maandamano lazima niende kwa maandamano kwa kitu kinamuhusu mfanyikazi. Sio kupeleka watu kwa maandamano. Unajiuliza mwisho wake wewe unataka kupata nini? Because serikali ilitangaza, William Samoei Ruto kaingia kwa ofisi akatengeneza baraza la mawaziri, ameappoint watu, hata huko anaendelea kutuappointia watu huku Western. Wewe bado hujabelieve ya kwamba he's the president. Why do you want us to live in denial?
Kwa sababu wanamaliza wakati wa kwenda huku na kule. Hata sasa wanaita rais kufungua projects za county. Sasa wewe kama rais anafungua projects za county, na wewe kama governor utafanya nini?
Government ya Vihiga county, kama ni hospitali zile zilijengwa na Akaranga na wametuletea maendeleo. Barabara ile walifungua kitambo, majengo Kisambai, Amisi, Shamaho, hadi sasa wamekuja kuifungua mara ya 3.
Now, Francis Atwoli is the Court Secretary General. And clearly Francis Atwoli is not now in conformity, or rather is not supporting Raila Odinga. It is not true, and if you look at the speeches, it is not true that Atwoli is supporting William Ruto because he has to get support for the workers. Honestly, even during Uhuru Kenyatta time, Atwoli was the least, could not even negotiate with Uhuru Kenyatta for salary increment for the workers. And there is something I've always maintained. If the KOTU is to fight for the plight of workers, it cannot go to bed with government. If you want to push Ruto to the core, if you want to push Kenya Kwanza, then the best was to push, don't go to bed with the government, and make sure you bring the workers together, make one unitary force, make one force, and when you take a position like protesting or even go slow, it's one force against government. On that way, you can bring government on table. And so, when I listen to the court boss saying, what will they get if they are not with government? I'm like, that school of thought did not have a deeper perspective. It's true, if you want to fight for the plight of workers, you cannot go to bed with government. But the reason why Atwoli went to support William Ruto, which is clearly, is the fact that it's for the security of Kenya in that position. I remember the time he was really fought left, right, and center, especially on that position. And number 2 was also about the interests. Number 3, Atwoli was one of the leaders that really, remember, Kateni meeting mtoto ataanguka, mtoto atajenga, remember? So they had already spread, they were part of the anti-Ruto venom during Azimio la Umoja campaigns. And so some of these people just went for the safe spaces, so that he will be safe, that maybe William Ruto will go after him. And of course there was about interest. Now clearly, there is something about what I saw in Vihiga. And that is what Atwoli tried, that is what Atwoli was actually trying to achieve. You will also realize that that tour politically was Raila Odinga's, it came a week after William Ruto spent nearly 5 days in the western area. So they attended a funeral in Budalangi, in Busia, then flew to the one in Vihiga. So politically, it was Raila Odinga's effort to try to counter William Ruto. And I think even the newspapers carried that story that Raila is trying to counter William Ruto in the Western Belt. Now, these leaders were dispatched strategically to checkmate Raila Odinga. And clearly, there was, if you even check at the messaging, they were dispatched to make sure that they counter what Raila Odinga and water down the significance. That is why Atwoli insisted on welcoming Raila Odinga so that he would be in charge of the program and suppress an impression that, you know, Raila Odinga as a guest, but as someone who has been invited. He wanted to achieve the impression that maybe he's the person who has invited Raila Odinga in that Vihiga County. So that is one thing that was happening. Number two, now Atwoli understood one thing, that Vihiga County has been complained, and even the Western Belt complained about what William Ruto was, about the tour by William Ruto. But it didn't bring anything apart from just the normal political rhetoric. And when I see leaders yapping, I think Osotsi is saying that they launched projects that were county government projects, and some were projects that had already been launched initially and they were relaunched. So what Atwoli wanted to do, or why he was insisting on Raila Odinga, he didn't want to be sidelined because he knew that Raila has the masses. In Western, or even the Vihiga, the Luanda, those areas, Raila had the masses. And because Raila had the masses, he knew very well that if Osotsi would take the ODM line and be in charge of that program, bring in Raila Odinga, it will create that wedge, the rift between Raila team and Atwoli team. And on that way, he will be suppressed. So it's about the Western, it's about trying to manage the masses so that he's not seen, because Raila is there and the masses has Raila. If you look at the pedigree of those leaders that attended that funeral, the only senior leader that commanded the masses there was Raila Odinga. Mudavadi is there but comes distant second. Number three, there is some Western supremacy, and both Atwoli agrees by the virtue of the leadership that Mudavadi and Wetangula are above him, but will still want to remain the de facto leader. The moment he realized that Osotsi was taking charge and was now going to invite Raila Odinga, to some extent he was feeling that his position, or rather his stake, to be the Western Kenya supremacy, Western Kenya Supremo, was coming under threat by the new leaders. But I want to believe that it was already organized. I've listened to both Raila and what also they say. Isn't it in Western? And you know, Western Muleme Nation must rise beyond the partisan politics, because there is, I listened to Malala the other day saying that ANC cannot produce a presidential candidate because it's a village party. So if ANC is a village party, and the same measure, Mudavadi is telling the country that William Ruto cannot be defeated, and so they seem to be giving Ruto a ride, why don't you give the alternative voices a chance to thrive? And clearly, there was a clear intention to suppress the ODM team in that funeral. Because to some extent, Osotsi was asking, why is the deputy governor not allowed to speak? Because if Atwoli was taking charge, then he was to bring Raila. There was a clear line to make sure that those within the ODM ranks are actually locked out. Because after Raila, probably it will take the government side where Mudavadi and the team would address the morning. I still believe and I want to say this for the record, it is not true that KOTU can fight for the rights of the workers while going to bed with government. It can never work that way. When KOTU boss is meeting William Ruto, it's about the interest of the individuals, but not the workers. And if it is true, then someone should present us tangible resolution that has favored workers since Atwoli started working with William Ruto, that has come because of that working relationship. It's not new. Workers got even road deals during Uhuru era because Atwoli went to bed with Uhuru Kenyatta, then administration. It is still the same story with William Ruto. So I don't really think it's true on what they're saying. Atwoli is a trade unionist. I still believe that Raila is a politician within the ODM ranks. There is nothing wrong with an ODM senator, if he's the most senior ODM leader there, to invite the ODM leader. Because just like the other side of government, if Mudavadi is to be invited by government, then he's supposed to be invited by most senior leader on that end, which is even the governor or someone. But Atwoli stands in as a neutral arbiter. There is no value on insisting on inviting Raila Odinga if clearly you had veered off and you still believe that what Raila is doing is wrong in respect of the country. That's my bold.